This video is continuing to look at the play Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff. Now this is dealing with Act 1, and the first part of the play, so from the start of Act 1 up to the point we pick up here, is dealt with in an earlier video on this YouTube channel. So the best way of using this video is to make sure you've got a copy of the play or a copy of your notes with you, and to follow through what we're talking about, maybe make some annotations, maybe collect together some notes. Generally, reading a play, when you're thinking about it, kind of thinking about things as they happen, making some notes is the first stage. What you will then need to do is to sort out your ideas into ways that make it more easy for you to revise. So I wouldn't try to revise a play for an examination by just going off your annotated book notes. I definitely try and revise by making character notes following a character's development, picking out key quotations, looking at a theme, following the development of a theme. So this really is the first part of your process when you're coming to look at this text. So to get started then, the previous video finished here. So that's kind of where we're going to pick up on the entrance of Mason. So we've had Osborne arrive in the trenches, been talking to Hardy. During that kind of exposition, so that beginning of the play where the writer's establishing character, theme and setting, during the exposition we've learned about Osborne being kind of steady, reliable, being slightly older, Hardy being slightly more reckless, careless, not paying attention to detail, and their conversation has talked about Stanhope and the fact that he's an overall kind of good and respected commander, but that he has turned to drink in order to enable him to cope with the conditions in the trenches. So this particular section we're going to look at starts with the trailing off of of Hardy's song as Osborne has said goodbye. So Hardy leaves, and then Osborne gets up and Mason comes in. Now Mason, you can see by this note, is presented through his dialogue. And there are two things about Mason. First of all, he is not the same class as the senior officers. So if you think about England, kind of 1917, 1918, class system being quite hierarchical, being in order in terms of I suppose upper classes, middle classes, lower classes. Mason is a servant, and that's made clear kind of through his dialogue, through his way of speaking. You'll notice that he says things like, it hasn't got, he's not speaking as nicely as the other kind of officers. Pardon me. So his pronunciation is being kind of used to indicate that he's not speaking in received pronunciation, that kind of more clipped way that the upper class would speak. He also often provides some comic relief, so some not kind of outrageously funny moments, because this isn't a play where there is kind of great raucous, great riotous comedy, but he is providing some comic relief at times. So comes in with soups, cutlets. So cutlets are small kind of pieces of meat, and pineapple. And then the idea that Mason can't identify which animal the meat has come from is where this kind of small amount of humour comes from. All he'll say is it's cutlets. They're kind of cut from, into shape from some sort of animal. And he says, now, sir, you've got me. I shouldn't like to commit myself. Again, that's dialogue. Too deep, sir. Okay. And it's also, he's saying, well, this meat is ordinary ration meat, so processed meat, but a new shape. Okay, they're meant to be excited about the fact that this is a novelty. There is the same meat that they always eat has been cut into a new shape. So again, you're looking at the kind of poor quality of rations, poor quality of food and difficult conditions. We then move into this kind of series of stage directions, and it's got some useful things in it for Raleigh. Okay, so if you're doing character notes on Raleigh, you can pick up on the fact that his voice is boyish. He's like a boy. He sounds young. We learn later that, he's only just left school. And there's the contrast between the boyish quality of Raleigh's voice and the fact that the older man is calling him sir. And again, that's rank. That's the idea of, this hierarchy in the army, because Raleigh has come in as a higher rank, as a second lieutenant, and he's being shown in by one of the soldiers who's got to call him sir. We have boyish repeated twice, okay? The soldier is kind of prompting him, well, you better go down, sir. Better go down, sir. Like, this is what you do. Because it becomes clear that Raleigh is slightly kind of in shock, at least out of his depth. Okay, so he's bewildered. If you're bewildered, you're confused, right? He gropes his way down, so he's putting his hands out, trying to kind of feel his way down. He's a well-built, healthy-looking boy of about 18 with the very new uniform of a second lieutenant. So here he really is kind of a very young man in a very unfamiliar and threatening situation. And he's trying to kind of make the best out of everything within his frame of reference. So we call something a frame of reference when we're talking about what you already know that you can refer to judge other things. So Raleigh's entire frame of reference is school. He knows that world, he knows that universe. And so in finding himself in the trenches, he's going to kind of carry on applying his rules, his guidelines, his kind of learning from the way that school operates. So Osborne kind of looks up surprised to see him, and we know that he is a new officer. So again, Raleigh has got some status there. He's not one of the regular soldiers. The language to do with him being unsure and his dialogue to do with him being unsure carry on through this scene. So if you sit gingerly on something, it means cautiously, carefully, right? So he's not quite sure as he's looking around where he's meant to sit, what he's meant to sit on, if it's going to support him. He's kind of hesitant when he's speaking. He doesn't take his pack off. Osborne has to say to him, we'll take your bag off. And says, oh, right, yeah, the idea that you don't drink whiskey when he's offered a whiskey, he quickly wants to say, yes, well, yeah, just a small one. So the impression is that actually he hasn't been used to drinking strong alcohol. He's only 18, he's just left school, but he's in this unfamiliar adult situation. And it becomes, clear, I just landed a week ago, means, I just landed from the ship landed, the ship kind of got onto land a week ago. And his self-consciousness, his kind of awareness that he doesn't quite know what to do, holds up a drink. Here's luck, sir. It's kind of a very schoolboyish toast, a very schoolboyish wish. And everything about Raleigh is emphasising his youth and his school days. He doesn't know, in this section, what the rules are, how to address other people, what to do. He's not been in the army very long at all. But as soon as we get the idea of school, he absolutely kind of understands what he's talking about. He's comfortable with that conversation. One little thing to kind of add in here is this information about Osborne. You'll find the other officers call me uncle, with all those ideas and connections and connotations of somebody who's older, more solid, more dependable, maybe some wisdom, a male figure that you can rely on. So Osborne, older and wiser, and Raleigh represents youthful idealism. So obviously youthful meaning young, and if you are idealistic, if you are displaying idealism, it means that you are really kind of trying to make everything seem as good as possible, that you're quite innocent, that you're quite naive. The real time when Raleigh brightens up is when Captain Stanhope is mentioned. And again, Raleigh reveals that school is really what he feels comfortable talking about, because we learn that he's been to school with Stanhope, and Stanhope was one of the older boys that a very young Raleigh looked up to. And we call that hero worship, the idea that you get kind of a hero and you think they're absolutely amazing. And clearly, when he's been at school, Stanhope has been the person who Raleigh has wanted most to be like. He says, I was only a kid and he was one of the big fellows. He's 3 years older than I am. You know, the idea that that makes a huge difference when you're at school. If somebody's 3 years above you, you know, especially depending if you're very young, it can seem like the older student is massively grown up. And they both agree that Stanhope is a splendid chap. And Raleigh's references for that, Raleigh's kind of evidence, is his sporting achievements at rugby and at cricket. So rugger is rugby, talking about wickets is cricket. And he is happy talking about Stanhope as Dennis. Okay, and then again, he realises that he probably should call him Captain Stanhope, and he has to, you know, be told what the convention, what the rules are for how he refers to his senior officer. Now, we learn later that Osborne was himself a school teacher, and so they drop into this kind of conversation about school, which is familiar to both of them and therefore comforting, but is also incongruous. Something is incongruous if it doesn't fit, okay, if it seems kind of disconnected. So you have these two men sitting in a kind of trench in the middle of a war, but they're talking about what awards they got for school sport. And this whole conversation serves kind of a few purposes. It establishes the connections between Raleigh and Stanhope, that actually, you know, there is a friendship there, or a family friendship. Our fathers were friends. Dennis used to come and stay with us on the holidays. We were terrific pals. So here's somebody who knows Stanhope before the war, which is going to be important. It also continues to talk about the language of school days. Okay, so that whole frame of reference of school, all signifying how young and innocent Raleigh is. And it shows the kind of ideas of class and family connections, because Raleigh is kind of talking this language of enthusiasm, you know, keen to get out, an amazing bit of luck. And Raleigh reveals that basically he's pulled some strings. He's got a family member who is a important general, and he has deliberately asked to be placed with Stanhope's under Stanhope's command. And we don't know why he's done this. I mean, we suppose that it's because he really admires Stanhope. He'll be a familiar face. He's a family friend. He wants to be there to support him. But the idea that a very young officer coming in would be able to specify or influence which regiment he was posted to, or which battalion he was posted to, really does show the class that Raleigh and Stanhope are coming from. Okay, because Osborne straight away kind of realises General Raleigh. Okay, so hang on, this is your connection. Wow. And Raleigh kind of shows that he's had a quiet word, and then they both play this idea of extraordinary coincidence. You know, Raleigh has asked his uncle, can I be put with Stanhope? And all of a sudden he is. Raleigh knows what he's done because, he says, I did an awful thing. I kind of asked the question that I shouldn't have done. And Osborne knows and plays along with the idea, extraordinary coincidence. They both know that General Raleigh has sorted it out for his nephew. Then another layer of connection, we learn the link between Stanhope and Raleigh is Raleigh's sister, to whom Stanhope is almost officially engaged. Okay, not quite, but there is that strong connection between the two families. Stanhope would be or would have been expected to marry Raleigh's sister. And Raleigh kind of says one of his other reasons is that actually he can, give information in a good way. This is a boy who is very idealistic, who is very innocent and positive. He wants to be able to reassure his sister that actually he's going to be able to say Stanhope's okay. It's kind of poignant. Okay, the word poignant means kind of really sad when you think about it, because by the end of the play, obviously we know that Raleigh dies, we know that Stanhope is almost certainly going to die, and the poor sister will be left having lost both her brother and her almost fiancé. So, Raleigh's idea of getting into the same battalion as Stanhope really just means that they get to die together rather than to kind of support each other. And now he's out here on the battlefield, Raleigh starts to have second thoughts, and his doubts are shown by this kind of fragmentation of his speech. So you get a lot of dashes, his pauses. Oh, I've just underlined one of Osborne's there. That's to kind of show that, again, Osborne pausing, because Osborne's starting to realise that Raleigh won't have seen the difference in Stanhope. So both of them are using kind of pauses in conversation to feel their way around their own kind of worries or kind of concerns at that moment, right? And Raleigh kind of confesses that he wasn't quite, he didn't quite think it through. Maybe there'll be a problem with this. And Osborne is kind of, no, it's fine. You say it's a good time since you last saw him. So it's a long time since you last saw him. He knows that the Stanhope that Raleigh is going to find is very different to the person who now exists because of the consequences of the war. And he tries to, warn him, you mustn't expect to find him quite the same. He's been out here a long time. It tells on a man rather badly. And, he warns him, he's a little bit quick-tempered. And we realise exactly how much Stanhope has changed, because Raleigh's anecdote, his kind of personal story about Stanhope, is, yes, I remember his temper. At one point, he caught some chaps with a bottle of whiskey, and he absolutely disapproved so much that he was furiously angry. Okay, so this shows how much Stanhope has changed, right? We've got the idea he was frightfully down on smoking. That he's going to smoke, and Osborne is trying to really kind of prepare Raleigh for the change he's going to see. He keeps bringing this up, and Raleigh really doesn't understand, even though he's going, oh yes. Nothing can prepare him for really what he's going to find. And we have Osborne kind of getting into practical mode, and off we go in terms of, sorting Raleigh out. You have to wait for here. And again, we've got this, righto, it's schoolboy language that Raleigh's speaking in. We get some information about the kind of conditions and the reality of life. You take your boots off in the daytime, but it's better to, or you can take your boots off, but it's better to keep pretty much dressed always, because people never know when they're going to have to run away from something. So you can't get undressed because you can't take the time to get dressed. There's also the kind of expectation that actually Raleigh will adapt to conditions which are poor. This is ironic because he won't have time to adapt. He's going to be killed before he ever gets the chance to get used to what it's like. There's that glimpse in Act 3 at the end after they come back from the raid that he's seen all of these awful things and it's started to take its toll, but very, very soon afterwards he dies. And Osborne is trying to explain the kind of reality of life there. And Raleigh picks up on the idea that it is kind of ominous. I've never known anything so quiet as those trenches. Right? So this idea that it's not what he expected is there. When they refer to Wipers, they're referring to Ypres, which is a kind of town. And there's some reflection on the idea of common humanity. Now, obviously, humanity to do with humans, what it is to be human, and common shared. So the idea that, you know, both the British and the Germans are basically just men sitting in trenches, you know, thinking the same things. And the idea of waiting and passing the time comes in again here. You know, it makes me feel we're all just waiting for something. And, you know, Osborne agrees, but says that, you know, when anything happens, it happens quickly. That's the idea that life can change in the, you know, a blink of an eye, in a very, very kind of quick moment. And then it's back to waiting. And Osborne kind of realises that Raleigh will have thought it was fighting all the time, whereas actually the agony of it, the suffering, is these periods of waiting. Now, I'd kind of argue this point here that I've written out, that arguably their lives are pervaded by conflict. There is this kind of idea of conflict all the time, but it's not physical fighting. They can't get away from the war. It isn't all military physical warfare, but it is horrific nonetheless. You have the strange juxtaposition. Okay, so if you are juxtaposing something, the juxtaposition, the placing next to each other of two things that then invites you to compare them. So the juxtaposition of the kind of pre-war and during the war ways of life, that there is a ruined village, the cellar of a house, a little garden, a factory garden wall, but over all of that domestic, all of that kind of village lifestyle, house, comfortable kind of normal life, is now placed warfare and battlefield. You might just want to take a note, you know, the very lights, the idea that, you know, these are lights that both sides use, it's a little bit of jargon. And Osborne kind of tries to find something romantic about it all, you know, something beautiful in the horror. Raleigh is very keen to agree with him, right? Just trying to really kind of create a relationship, I guess, with Osborne, trying to kind of find friendship or trying to find comfort in the situation he finds himself. We then get Mason coming back in, and his "I've had a rather unpleasant surprise, sir." And put within context there, because obviously, you know, within the war, there are things that are genuinely horrific. And so Mason's rather unpleasant surprise has to be placed within context. And he says, actually, the what he thought was pineapple is actually apricots, right? And Osborne plays along with this. You know, it must have given you a turn. You know, that must have been a horrible surprise for you. So it's the kind of small and mundane details of life. Mundane kind of means boring, everyday details of life. So, you know, they can't get the food, they can't get the provisions. What they do get is poor quality. And again, it's a little bit of kind of wry humour. Okay, so it's not kind of massively very funny humour, it's just kind of eyebrow-raising humour, wry humour. We then get this big block of the first introduction of Captain Stanhope as he comes into the trench. So in terms of your notes on Stanhope, you might want leading figure, tall and slim. Okay, he's in charge, he's in kind of good shape. Despite his stars of rank, he is no more than a boy. Okay, so we know that Raleigh is 18 and Stanhope is only 3 years older. So even though he's got this massive kind of horrific weight of experience behind him of war, he's really a very young man. He's clearly kind of trying to look out for himself in terms of his appearance, his uniform. He's attractive, but this particular section, there's a pallor under his skin. Okay, a pallor is when you kind of look pale and unhealthy. Okay, so he's got this kind of quality to his skin that's making him look very tired and ill. Dark shadows under his eyes. Right, so the war is taking its toll on him. He's trying to keep control of all of his outward appearance, but actually inside it's really kind of psychologically taking its toll. So, he can brush his hair, but he can't hide the shadows under his eyes. I just make a little note about Trotter. He is more of a comic character, red, fat, round. His uniform looks like it's bursting out. So, the details of Trotter. And we're establishing Stanhope here as attentive and focused on detail and order, despite everything. Okay, so he's, if he'd have seen Hardy, he would have commented on the awful state Hardy had left the trenches in. He refers to, where are the servants? He's used to having people working for him or kind of servants. And very quickly is the kind of bring some whiskey, right? Osborne introduces or makes Stanhope aware that, hang on, there's somebody here. And all of a sudden, he stops short at the sight of Raleigh. He realises exactly who Raleigh is and is stunned to see him. Word dazed is used. And instantly, Stanhope, you get this indication that all of the things that Osborne was wanting to warn Raleigh about, Stanhope is painfully aware of. So he is aware that actually he has massively deteriorated in a lot of ways due to the war. He is no longer the person who Raleigh knew at school, who he hero worshipped, and in a lot of ways he is no longer the person who Raleigh's sister loves. And he wants to hide that from the people at home, from his family and his loved ones. I see rather a coincidence. Obviously, he's got no evidence that Raleigh has set this up. He has no reason to know that Raleigh has set this up. It just seems to be a horrible coincidence for him. And you get this strange then juxtaposition, this side-by-side kind of action on stage of Osborne and Trotter talking to each other about the pineapple and the apricots, and Stanhope and Raleigh staring at each other and looking at each other and all of the awkwardness in their conversation. And we understand what is underlying it. Raleigh is realising about Stanhope. Stanhope is realising all the things that Raleigh's going to know about him. Once the whiskey arrives, we have a kind of forced happiness from Stanhope. Okay, he uses Osborne's nickname, come along uncle. And there may also be a kind of hint that actually the appearance of the whiskey is what reinvigorates, is what kind of reactivates Stanhope. All of a sudden he thinks, well, okay, I can cope. There's some whiskey. So you get the kind of dialogue as they're getting to know Raleigh, and Trotter is kind of trying to make him feel a little bit at home. But again, this comment from Trotter shows exactly, how slowly time passes and the kind of consequences of the war. It makes you feel like you've been here forever. And there's a small moment of kind of physical comedy with Trotter trying to sit on the box and moving it round, which then blends into the kind of what kind of soup is it? Expecting a flavour, but it's yellow soup, sir. And they say it's got a very deep yellow flavour. They have no idea what's in the soup. Poor Mason is trying to make anything edible with the really bad ingredients he's got. And the reason why pepper is so important and the reason why they need it so much is that this stuff tastes awful. They're using pepper to try and disguise the horrible taste of everything. Stanhope's advice to Mason about the pepper kind of indicates that Stanhope has come to a place where he thinks he can only rely on himself. He has to be self-sufficient. Don't rely on anybody else to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. And it's part of that attitude that is meaning that Stanhope is, first of all, such a good commander in terms of looking out for the men, but also why he's so damaged, because he's taking everything upon himself. He's absorbing everything himself. There's the jargon. He's somebody's trying to help, or Mason's trying to help the soldier sound right. But they need the pepper. We get more kind of hints about the lack of information in the trenches. So, what's going on. And actually Trotter says he gets his information from his wife. It'll obviously be late because it has to reach England and then be put in a letter and then reach him again. But that's his source of information. And we get a little bit more kind of comedy about the cutlets in terms of they're so bad they can't be cut. And, that's a joke. Okay, we then kind of move to Stanhope being in charge. Okay, and we learn that he is precise and reliable. He's not going to let Trotter have extra time off because he's assured Hibbert that Hibbert will be allowed to go off duty at 8. So that has to be stuck to. An important kind of symbol then comes in this bit. Trotter decides that he's going to make a chart. And this chart starts to symbolise exactly, what do you do with your time? Well, this is Trotter's way of coping. He isn't drinking, he's clearly eating, but he's going to mark off the time in little circles. He's going to kind of cross them off just to show, almost like, prisoners marking the time of their sentence on the wall in little kind of tally charts. He's going to try and just keep a record of the time in order to pass the time. And the chart comes back later when they talk about potentially, destroying it or messing up and why that shouldn't be allowed to happen. Trotter makes the comment, I never knew anything like a war for upsetting meals, kind of a little bit of comedy. It's that idea of, well, it really does upset our meal times. Later on, that can link with a comment in a conversation between Stanhope and the Colonel, when it's strongly implied that, the attack isn't going to be called off or modified, even though it would save men's lives, because the higher up commanders aren't prepared to have their dinner disturbed. So Trotter's joking, but actually that becomes a real thing later on in the play, which causes people to die. You also get the reality of, bring your gun because you've got to shoot rats and your gas mask. And it's the order of priority, really, sort out the boredom, shoot the rats, sort out the health risk, shoot the rats, and then save your life by taking your gas mask. And Raleigh, again, is kind of, trying to say, I was shown the way at home. I can put my gas mask on. And again, it's like school. He wants to kind of say that, yes, I know how to do that. Okay, so as we move through here, you've got the idea of the reality of warfare and the nicknames and things they have for stuff. I think somewhere it's referred to as a pineapple. Again, that kind of familiar, slightly jokey, we all know what this looks like kind of way of looking at it. But you have generally kind of people trying to put Raleigh at his ease, trying to get him prepared for everything and give him that advice, which actually might save his life. If you see them, judge it and run like stink sometimes, because this thing will land and explode and kill you. Right, we're going to leave this particular thing here, look out for part 3, which will be on its way.